All right, good morning, everyone. It is 10 o'clock, Thursday, January 26th, and this is the first Public Safety Committee meeting of the year. I will call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of this meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The first order of business is the election of chair. I will take any nominations from the floor for the office of chair. Are there any nominations?
Nominate Jimmy Ward.
Okay. I'd like to nominate myself. Do we need a second on those?
No second on the nominations are required. We'll go ahead and vote in the order that the nominations were received. So all those in favor of Councilmember Ward as chair, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Since there is an election, a chair elected, no additional votes on the other nominations are required. Mr. Chair, you can take nominations for the office of vice chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll now open the floor to nominations for vice chair. I'll nominate Blair Hahn.
myself then again.
I'll second.
Which one are we seconding? Because I heard two things simultaneously.
No,
He's
Just Jan.
Seconding what?
we're
For
I'm seconding
Jan.
Jan as
Okay.
vice chair.
Okay, 'cause you had said at the same time.
I'll withdraw it.
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard
I
everything correctly.
didn't
Okay.
hear him say anything.
Gotcha. Go ahead. You can call for a vote, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, we now need to call for a vote for election of vice chair to Jan Anderson. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 3, citizens' comments. All comments have a time limit of 3 minutes.
Mr. Klaus?
The proposed draft of the new noise ordinance will simply not work for a number of IOP residents. In fact, it is discriminatory and narcissistic. Allowing 75 dBs from a commercial property located in a residential neighborhood is unconscionable. No common sense. Those same residents are only allowed 60 dBs, which are 30 feet from the Sweetgrass Inn. Really? You are giving a pyromaniac matches for Christmas. It's all about the money. I have made numerous proposals which carve out the Sweetgrass Inn, placing it in its own noise time zone, thus far only to fall on deaf ears because it is outside the box. Henry Ford said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. In October, Rick Bradley, Wild Dunes board member, presented the short-term rental listening sessions to council. Number one issue, noise. I guess we did not hear Mr. Bradley. Maybe he did not talk loud enough, or we forgot about his presentation. How many of you have personally experienced the cruise ship theme park atmosphere at the Sweetgrass Inn in high season on a busy afternoon day? And for how long? November 4, the concert from hell at 8 p.m. The noise was so intense, vibrating Mrs. Williamson windows and doors. The music was heard beyond 49th Avenue. DBAs of 88.8 on our screen porch, 54.8 inside our house, which the reading was 10 foot from a closed door with high impact glass. We contend the Sweetgrass Inn must conform to the residential 60 dBAs standard, which is in your proposal. We contend the 2 to 5 daily PM concerts must cease immediately. Hyatt is unable to quantify said concerts' effect on revenue. We contend no more concerts from hell, part 1 or part 2. Fact, Wild Dunes Community Association Board and the GPHOA have ignored us on every complaint, refusing to help, both being joined at the hip with Wild Dunes LLC, the resort. We are the classic microcosm of what is currently evolving on the IOP right now. We are the proverbial bone being given to the big dog as a result of the 5 new ordinances which have been passed against the resort. We are the ones being punished. Please tell us what the reason is we're having to put up with this nuisance. To the IOP administrators, you are screwing with our property values. We have worked in good faith with Mrs. Hack on the issues, and we have made some progress. Frankly, we have a long way to go. She will tell you we have been patient. However, the busy season is not far off. We are not enemies. However, we do have differences of opinion. Unfortunately, this is a major setback in what we've been doing with her. It's all about the money.
Good morning. I'm Valerie Kraus. I've owned property in Wild Dunes since 2004 and been a full-time resident since the end of 2016. I currently live at 4 Hidden Green Lane, and I was building my dream home at 257th Avenue, but it is now currently for sale. My husband and I are retired medical professionals, and any care that we ever gave, we always followed the caveat, first, do no harm, because we feel it's very important. All the noise coming from the hotel, from the trash to the deliveries to the entertainment venues, is directly to the abutting residential neighborhood. We believe the proposed noise ordinance will cause harm to the residents in this adjacent property. The National Institute of Health, along with the EPA, and the World Health Organization have stated long that any prolonged noise above 70 decibels causes permanent hearing loss. In addition, the EPA recommends a maximum indoor noise level of 45 decibels and a maximum outdoor noise level of 55 decibels in mixed-use communities where commercial property abuts residential properties. The proposed level of 60 decibels during daytime hours in a residential neighborhood is 5 decibels above this limit. But more importantly, the recommended maximum in a commercial area of 75 decibels is 20 decibels higher than the proposed maximum limit from the EPA. This is a hot topic. They are currently doing studies, and there's increased focus on this, especially in mixed-use commercial residential neighborhoods. Exposure to higher than recommended noise level has been linked to numerous health problems, including hypertension, lowered cognitive ability, cardiovascular disease, hearing loss, interference with sleep, communication, and the simple enjoyment of daily activities. Allowing environmental noise levels above 45 decibels indoors and 55 decibels outdoors has the extreme potential of causing harm to the residents, to their health, to their sleep, to their ability to communicate, to their comfort, and to their peace of mind. We found it interesting that it will be unlawful to keep any animal or bird which disturbs the comfort or repose of any reasonable person in the vicinity. However, the level from the hotel noise does much more than disturb the comfort or repose. It causes people harm. Please consider lowering the maximal decibel noise level for the health and well-being of us all. As an aside, Australia has a maximum decibel level of 35, and they all seem to be very happy people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me? Okay, those are the only two signed up. Now, under old business, the first item is discussion of changes to the noise ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, we've got two people that thought they signed up apparently.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I just signed in Tuesday night and today.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you only had signed it for
We
Tuesday.
need to make a motion.
Okay.
to
No,
allow-
no, no.
No,
Come on up.
Thank you very much. Before I begin this, if I could just make a suggestion to you all, I think the 3-minute limit only is not beneficial for these committees. You ought to set something up that allows for a little give and take. It can be done respectfully. When you're done, sit back down. But I think it would be beneficial if you're allowed to have a little give and take. As you, again, Ted McKnight, Isle of Palms resident, you all know I was here 2 days ago, and this is kind of a follow-up to that. I had one word that would describe what I was trying to make, and if you said safety, you are correct. What's your response to the points I made about safety? Do you agree that safety is the #1 duty of elected officials for their constituents? And if not, what is? Why didn't you require SCDOT to have a safety barrier on the bridge between the bike and pedestrian lanes and the vehicular traffic lanes? What have you done to get SCDOT to give you all the information available concerning safety barriers on a bridge? What inquiries have you made or asked city personnel to make about a safety barrier on the bridge? What are the daily usage numbers for, 1, pedestrians, and 2, bicyclists using the bridge? Since the change in the bridge, how many near collisions have occurred in which at least one vehicle has veered into the bicycle pedestrian lane? What's been done to coordinate with Mount Pleasant to synchronize the traffic lights to expedite traffic leaving the IOP? Do you agree that the parking on Palm Boulevard is unsafe? If not, please fully explain why not. Are you aware that SCDOT's requirement for 60-degree angle parking requires an excess of 40 feet from the curb to the pavement for safely exiting the parking space without going onto the highway, and therefore violating the law not to do so and impede oncoming traffic? Are you aware that SCDOT made a video of their vehicle backing out of a 60-degree angle parking space on Palm Boulevard that was carefully selected to demonstrate it was safe, when in fact, for more than 80% of parking spaces, it was not safe and therefore totally and intentionally deceptive? To prove that point and to demonstrate to the public that when it comes to traffic and the IOP, safety is not the #1 issue, invite SCDOT to return with their same vehicles, but this time we will do the test on every block between 21st and 40th. It's been said, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. #1, do you believe that? Do you recognize that SCDOT fooled council before? Do you realize that SCDOT is trying to fool council again? Do you recognize that the state has violated its constitution with the law previously known as Senate Bill 40? Do you know by forfeiting IOP's right to change for parking on Palm Boulevard, we citizens are having to pay more than $3 million for police services that we ought not to be paying? Don't you think you ought to explain to your constituents why you are happy to do so? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Terry Hack, and I represent owners of Wild Dunes. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I apologize if my request to speak was not logged in. First of all, I respect our neighbors. As Mr. Klaus states, we are not enemies, and I continue to work in good faith to resolve the issues. I thank the staff and council for all of the research in this very complicated issue. I thank you for listening to the work session that we had previously in December, and happy that some of those discussions are reflected in the draft ordinance that the staff has provided for you today. As I committed, we are conducting a sound study with an outside engineering company. They're scheduled to be here in February for their first visit, and then they'll follow up during a more active time at the resort for a follow-up. And we are committed to taking any action that we can to ensure that our neighbors' peace is protected. And we are really committed to that. We will listen to the outcome of this discussion and the action that's being taken forward. But we really need a noise ordinance that allows an active resort to exist within a residential community, again, being respectful to all the neighbors and the surrounding neighbors of the resort. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for your comments. And we'll go into old business. Item A is discussion of changes to the noise ordinance. Desiree, I'll let you lead off with this.
Sure. I have provided to you all a copy of the changes to the noise ordinance that reflect the discussion at our last meeting last year, so I want to go through that. Unless there's any specific questions, I'll just go through those specific changes.
Does it include comments from our legal?
These do not. Our legal team has reviewed it. We have not received yet his written comments. However, nothing that he saw from the additions that we had made after our last meeting concerned him. There might be some changes in language, some additional definitions that may need to be included. So, this will be a work in progress that they'll be reviewing throughout the process.
Okay, thank you.
So the first change that we made based on your feedback was on subsection B on page 3, section titled noise measurement. The conversation at the time was whether or not we would want to allow the noise measurement to be taken from anywhere in the property. We discussed the challenges with some elevated porches or elevated areas that may be where people are spending their time and are being disturbed. And so we included language here that would allow the noise measurement from the police department to be taken anywhere within the boundary of the property. So that's what you can see there. Noise measurement shall be made using a sound level meter taken from anywhere within the boundary line of the complainant's property. So that was the first change from the last version that you saw last year. Subsection C, maximum decibel levels. We talked about the challenges with defining the areas as residentially zoned and commercially zoned. As you all know, Wild Dunes particularly, they're in a different zoning area, the PDD, so it's not categorized the same way as outside the gates as GC or SR1. Therefore, we included the language here that would apply different decibel levels, which we can have that discussion whether or not those limits are acceptable. But there would be a 60 decibel during the daytime in residentially occupied properties and 75 for those that are commercially occupied properties. The question at the time, at our last meeting that some members asked, and we have discussed this with our city attorney, is what decibel reading is taken when you have properties that are abutting each other, one residential and one commercial. The advice that were given is that the decibel reading that would apply would be the one that's provided to the where the noise is emanating from. So if the complainant is from a residential property, but they're complaining about noise emanating from a commercially used property, the commercially used decibel reading limit would be applied to that instance.
It's not what this says.
Desiree, I have a question.
Sure.
Review with us who came up with these decibel readings, these levels, and are they subject to adjustment?
Yeah, this is all in draft form, so all of this is subject for adjustment. I believe we started looking at similar drafted ordinances. We looked at the one from Kiowa and from the town of Mount Pleasant. We also looked at an ordinance from Charlotte. Just for comparison purposes, the daytime limit for example, in Kiowa, the daytime hours, the decibel limit for the daytime hours in Kiowa is 70. We have 60 here. They don't distinguish between residential and commercial, I don't believe. Therefore, that was an addition that we made.
If I can interrupt. Councilman Ward, in the last workshop that we had on the Public Safety Committee, the committee worked on these decibel levels and discussed them thoroughly.
Right, I
So
knew
I'd
that.
suggest if you go back
Yeah.
to that workshop and listen to it, you can hear our discussion in detail.
Yeah, my statement was just for the public record,
Okay.
for everybody to know. And also, same thing with the hours. I understand that some of the neighbors in the 57th Avenue neighborhood said that at times, music starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. But this says 10 a.m. And that's just the crux of the issue to me is the time and the decibel levels. I know they had a discussion, I went through it and everything, but I think we have an opportunity here to help out our residents, and I really think we need to do something about it.
The daytime and nighttime hours that are included in this draft are consistent to the daytime and nighttime hours that are currently in the existing noise ordinance. But that's subject to change as well.
Okay, so the 8 o'clock noise level would be 55 decibels in a residential area according to this.
Correct.
So that would be, they would not be in compliance if there was amplified music, probably,
Got
in the
it.
morning. My question about the measurement, which I think was what we were dealing with before, is under B1, noise measurements shall be made using sound level taken from anywhere within the boundary line of the complainant's property. Okay, but the measurement value is what I guess what I was questioning is, if the complainant is a resident, on a residential property, then the value governing that would be the measurement for residential or commercial.
It would be based on where the noise is emanating from. Because that's the noise, that's the noise that's creating the disruption of the complaint.
But it's still being taken from the complainant's property.
Correct.
But if you're complaining about the windjammer, to pick on the windjammer, you would then use 75 decibels. If you're complaining about the house beside the windjammer, then you use the 60 decibels.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you happen to have a timeline for proposed implementation of this?
Well, that will depend on city council. I mean, we're working on a draft. Once a draft is to a point where you all want to recommend it to city council for ratification, it would go through the regular ordinance process. Council, I'm sure we will have to go through a detailed analysis of the noise ordinance because they haven't seen it. It's all been done through the Public Safety Committee. So it depends how many meetings council wants to discuss it as the entire, with the entire policy setting body. And then once an ordinance is approved for first reading, then 7 days later, at a minimum, council can have a separate consideration of reading so that it could be ratified.
Well, I'd like to get it in front of council as soon as possible with adjustments.
That's what
And
we
then
would
let
like.
council decide.
We would like feedback on these changes. If there's anything that y'all would want to see different before we send it to council, that's the feedback we're hoping to get from the committee.
Yeah.
I have two issues. One is, we just all suffered through the lawn people coming by and blowing the yard and all that kind of stuff. That type of noise, for me personally, drives me nuts. My decibel meter said that everything was under 60 decibels inside the room when all that was happening, including people talking. So I don't know what the right decibel level is the point. I don't know if it should be 50, if it should be 60, if it should be 100. I don't have any idea. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to see how it works and then possibly revisit it 6 months from now with the help of our police department, because we're putting them out there to enforce this. And so the second issue I have is I would like to hear from Chief Cornett on what he thinks about this ordinance, its enforceability, and the decibel levels.
Yes, sir. That's one of the things we really appreciate about the decibel levels. It is a clear, defined, violated statute. Right now, it's open to somebody's personal opinion. This gives a clear, articulable argument in a court of law. If we said somebody violated, we can show proof that they violated by having a decibel level higher than what's in the ordinance. That's the whole thing that we love about this, is it is more enforceable because it takes away my personal opinion on it, takes away somebody else's personal opinion on it. It's just clear, and we look at a decibel reader based on what's written in the ordinance, and it's either right or it's wrong. And that's easy to defend in court too, as opposed to me just telling a jury, well, I thought it was too loud. You know, I can actually articulate it was too loud based on this reading from a decibel reader. So I'm a fan of this. I think it takes away any guesswork. It's pretty black and white.
Do you have an opinion as to the levels that are in this draft?
We were really basing those off of what we've seen in other places. And I mean, when we look at the other readings based on WebMD or based on CDC guidelines, it kind of felt like these were the ones that were going to be in the normal standards. Of course, like you said, if we come back and we're just having a lot of issues with it and there's still complaints, it is something council could revisit and change those decibel levels at that point.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And one more thing, with the taking it anywhere on the property line, that was one of the things that we saw because there was a complaint from neighboring properties where you have elevated floors, that it can travel up and still be loud up there when it might not be as loud on the property line. And that's one of the things we liked about having it moved to where it could be. So if we get a complainant that lives next door that says, hey, on my second or third floor balcony, it's too loud. This gives us the ability to go there, take that measurement from that location as opposed to being restricted to only taking on the property line.
Was there any discussion with either you, Chief, or with the administration about different types of noise? Because we also have the issue of low-frequency noise doesn't trigger the decibel meter, but is still very disruptive. I know at my house, at times, the
bass?
The bass, yeah, pictures will rattle but it only registers about 30, 40 decibels.
Well, there is a section in the draft ordinance that talks about specific prohibitions, and that could be something that could be included there if there's a specific noise that the city would like to prohibit altogether. Then that would be the section to include it. We currently have pets that are frequently creating continuous and frequent loud noise, mufflers, loudspeakers, hawking and peddling. So that would be the section that I would recommend if there's any, we can look at other, we can look into that and see if there's any other specific noise that would make sense to include in that.
And I hesitate using that as a dump all because that puts the chief back in the box of, well, he thinks it's loud or not loud. Mm-hmm. And so that, I would like to have something specific, that's an objective standard for whatever these noises are.
The research I did on that, there's a whole different set of standards, criteria for that. You don't use a dBA scale, you use a dBc scale. It's over a time period rather than a just point in time. It's far more complex. I'd suggest a baby step in this case that we go ahead and try to get our preliminary ordinance passed, and then we could further study this and ask and propose changes to it as first of all, we see how well this works.
Right.
But look at that as well. I agree that it's definitely not covered as well as we should on this, but if that's the case.
We can start looking into that now. I completely agree, and I've experienced that where the decibel readers are reading very low, but you can feel the bass, and that's an issue at my house too, where I live. So it is something we can certainly look at, and we'll start exploring it now so that we've got an answer when we get there, but certainly.
One other thing, and this is more with short-term rental issues than specifically the noise ordinance, but there's the highway guard, no, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the wrong one. That's the next issue, noiseaware.com. Have you done any research into Noise Aware? I've gotten some feedback from residents that are property managers, and they are now using Noise Aware in certain areas on the island, and they seem to like it. And this is for people who don't understand what this is. It's a passive a microphone that is put on the property line of any property, and if decibel readings exceed whatever the preset limit is that you can set yourself, you get a notice, the property manager gets a notice, and potentially the police would get a notice, depending on how often that triggers off. It might be worthwhile to look at incorporating that type of technology into something like this in the future. I'm not suggesting, as Janet said, that we muck this up and not move forward. I think we do need to move forward, but something I think we need to look at, because I expect that we will be looking at this ordinance again in 6 months.
Yeah. I'd suggest with something like that under enforcement, we have some language that says that if you have a violation or a repeat violation, that you could have some sort of device installed or something else, sort of, so that gives you,
Those may be something that we look at when we're drafting ordinances around short-term rental,
Yeah.
and gear that kind of more towards them. But we do have several that have reached out to me as well that said they have that, and they are loving it because they address the issue before it ever even comes to us, and it's making it a lot easier for them to avoid having those penalties because they're going ahead and addressing it before complaints come in. So, but maybe something that I definitely see value in it with those agencies, but I think we should look into it with short-term rentals.
can we put something like that? It's obviously a remedy for someone who has been a repeat violator. Do we need to put that in the ordinance, or is that something that we can automatically require
Well,
if it's not in the ordinance?
if you want to require it, then yes, it would need to be included and codified. We would need to evaluate what potential downsides would be to having that mandated to certain properties. I think it's an option for those that are we're dealing with repeat complainants or repeat issues. It's certainly an option that we can encourage folks to include, but if ultimately council wants to make it a requirement of certain properties, then that would have to be codified.
Chief, what's your opinion on that?
As far as I think if we were going to require it anywhere, it definitely has to be on an ordinance to do
Right,
so.
no, but are you a fan of that is the point? Or would you rather have that in your discretion, or do you want to have a hard line, you write a ticket when it happens X number of times?
I could kind of see either way. We would always encourage for them to be upfront and go ahead and get it before it becomes an issue. But as far as mandating it, I could go either way. If we mandate it from the beginning, it's one thing. If we maybe after a violation, they have to do it. But I would definitely say it needs to be concrete. If it's before a violation, part of your short-term rental, then you have to do it. Then we say that. If it's after one founded complaint, then you have to have it. But as long as we write it where we want it, I think it's definitely easy to enforce that way.
I think it would, if we're going to pull a license, I think we need to have that we've documented that we've tried remedial actions first.
I agree with that.
So that's sort of what I'm thinking of getting there, because the noise meter isn't going to stop the noise, it's just going to alert you that it's happening. So just bringing it into court, that would be one more thing that we've said. We've repeatedly had these, we've asked them to do this, they're still violating. And then if pulling a license is a pretty serious thing, so I guess I'm pretty much asking you, how willing are you to pull a license without?
I definitely, in my experience, when I have worked with trying to revoke business license in the past at my previous city, it is a very big court issue, and they typically bring in very high-priced attorneys. And so the more you lay out the steps that you have taken to remedy issues before you went that route, it definitely benefits the city to have done that. And I would definitely see benefit if we build it in there. After this, you have to have this. It's one more, like you said, it's one more layer that we can say we tried to work with them to prevent putting ourselves in a position to take somebody's business license.
Yeah.
How about penalties for repeat offenders that are commercial entities?
Well, that would agree. That would be,
Yes?
So you can see on the section. I think
We
it's
sort of
in-
skipped ahead. Do we want to finish
Yeah.
what you were talking about and then go to, because that's all.
Well,
Did
you were
not
talking
talk-
about residentials, and
We didn't,
that's not
well,
all the properties.
just bringing you up to date, Councilman Ward, we did not talk about violations at our last meeting. That's sort of where we stopped. So what we were talking about before was just what revisions had been made to what we had discussed, which I think we pretty much, have we gotten through all of that?
No, there is an additional section that you all asked to see included in this draft, which is permits for additional amplification. So
Yes.
if there was a commercial property that wanted to, had a special event and wanted to apply for a special permit, we took this entire section from the City of Charlotte's ordinance. They have a very similar process for folks to apply for a special permit for this. On the first section under application, it says that an application for a permit for additional amplification on commercially used property shall be submitted to the Alapalms Police Department. We included here or city council. We can treat it just the way we do for large city-sponsored events where the final decision rests on city council. So that would be a decision point we'd like to get feedback from this committee on. Then the other piece is that I wanted to highlight, there would be a limit on hours. So subsection C includes here that permits for additional amplification at a commercially used property shall be limited to 15 hours in a calendar year. So there are some guardrails that would allow you all to approve or deny a request based on how often these requests are coming in before you all. So I think that would be again, wanting to get feedback from you. I skipped over subsection B, notice of tentative approval. So this would require the property requesting a permit for additional amplification to notify the occupants of of properties that are within 500 feet of the property for which a permit has been granted within 72 days of
72 hours.
72 hours in advance of the event. Again, these are all taken from that other ordinance that Councilmember Jan shared with us. So that whole section is it's an addition from the last version that you said, and then under violations, we currently have this in the existing ordinance, and we wanted to make sure we bring it to this draft. Any repeated violations, and going back to Councilman Chair Ward's question, repeated violations may result in the suspension or revocation of any business license issued. So that would be the ultimate penalty, if you will, that the city currently has the ability and would continue to have the ability to pull a license if there's repeat violations and no way of remedying it.
And my question is, do we need to tighten that up a little bit to give us some teeth if we have to go to court?
Based on my experience, again, it would just be, if we did anything, we would add the step that we had already talked about. And maybe it's for every commercial business as opposed to just short-term rental, that we're having those issues where we say, after your violation, you have to have this device placed to help you, just an effort to mitigate it. That was the only thing I could really think of to strengthen that. And we would really probably treat it, any business, the same way we do short-term rentals. When you have this many violations, that's when we would go to the city administration and say, hey, we've reached this point now, it's time to look at the business license, the city administration would then bring it to you as a council to make that decision.
Well, what if it's just a resident that likes to party and sponsors parties at their house all the time?
We can't really revoke their residential status, but we would certainly, I think for us, we would go and write tickets for each violation, and that would come here in front of our court and our judge. And I've experienced these things too, where it's really just, I wish there was more to mitigate it other than just saying we would just write tickets, but that's really what
Okay, and we
the
can
only harm we have.
And it's $500 is our limit for each year for a bad resident.
Well, $500 per violation, and that's before court
Court
costs
assessments.
associated with it. When you add court costs, it turns into over $1,000 with the total cost put into it.
One thing to keep
We
in
have done
mind.
that once before, in my experience. It's come to council, and council has revoked their license for repeated, and they didn't pursue a lawsuit.
One thing to think about is a couple years ago when the city had made changes and amendments to the short-term rental ordinances and included a provision that would specify how many founded complaints could trigger the revocation of a license. So at the time, currently, it's 5 founded complaints would trigger a revocation of a license. That could be something that we can consider including here, having a set number
Okay.
of founded violations that would trigger council revoking that license.
Okay.
That would make it more.
We just need to make sure
Consistent.
and legal would be the one to determine whether we need it in both places or just under short-term rental regulations. So that we don't, if you repeat it more than once in engineering, you run into conflicts because they don't always match. So maybe it's only one location you put it so that you know it's clear.
Well, I'm concerned about doing 5, but I defer to the chief on that. And the reason is anything we do like this has the potential to pit residents against residents. And you can have a bad actor that's noisy. You can also have a bad actor that's just trying to punish that individual, and they're going to call and knowing that it's 5, they're going to sit like a hawk to get the 5th one so they can get the license revoked. And I don't want to see that on either side. I think part of our job is to mitigate disagreements between our residents and have us all live together as opposed to pitting one resident against another. And so that concerns me. That's just my personal concern, but I would defer to the chief on what he thinks.
It is certainly something that we keep in mind. It does happen, and so that's why we rested on, instead of a complaint in general, it had to be something that the police department went and made as a founded complaint. That would kind of eliminate those neighbors who were just trying to call on somebody because they've got a little bit of a argument going with them, or they don't like each other. Certainly something that we see happen occasionally, and so the 5 founded has really prevented that from being an issue so far.
I'd like to,
If I remember correctly, when we did revoke the license, it was applauded by the neighbors. They had problems too.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's what we want. We want to catch the few bad apples that are out there. One thing I think that we should have in here somewhere is that maybe the first time we have 5 valid complaints, we suspend the license for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever we want. And then the second, I don't know, what do you want, second 5 complaints or additional complaints, then you revoke. We definitely need that suspension in there before we revoke.
5 founded complaints has the potential for suspension, and that way we're not getting into the judge's purview and listening to the complaints. You make it too specific, it becomes too automatic, and it's going to have unintended consequences. I would rather let the judge deal with that, let the police deal with that. 5 complaints, boom, you go to court.
So for the founded complaints, the way that the short-term rental ordinance works is a complaint may be founded by the police department or the police officer that's responding to the violation, but he may decide to write a ticket at the time or write a warning or a verbal warning if his presence and his engagement causes corrective action and causes compliance. Often it may not yield an actual ticket.
Right.
But that's still a founded complaint, even though a ticket was not issued and was not adjudicated by the court. Is that the similar? Do you want to see the similar process for the revocation of a business license due to a noise complaint? So should it be, how would you call it? like, it would be an actual ticketed that was upheld by the court, or just a founded complaint. It was loud, even though it didn't generate an actual violation.
And if I could just piggyback onto that and say that the license revocation process is governed by the state law, and the way it's currently in our code, it is an automatic suspension.
Okay,
5 founded complaints is an automatic suspension by the staff, and then the suspension is pending a hearing by city council. So revocation never goes to court, really. It goes
Well,
an auto.
Comes to the council.
But then, it ultimately ends in the council's hands in terms of how you want to deal with each individual revocation. But it's an automatic process that it would just come to you all.
so the penalty would be suspension after 5
Correct.
founded complaints. That would be, it sounds like automatic, so that maybe if it's a friend of the council and everybody votes to go ahead and let them go, back in business, they've at least suffered because they've had weeks where they could not
That's correct.
operate.
And there would be a completely separate track with the legal, those 5 founded complaints could have generated 3 tickets. That would be getting handled by the judicial system separately.
Okay, so it's council that decides whether we revoke.
That's correct.
All right, what do you think?
I'm good.
So you want us to add, under the violations section, an option to suspend a business license after 5 founded complaints?
Well, I think Douglas said the law covers that now, right?
If it already exists, let's just leave it alone right now.
So we don't need to add anything to this
No.
ordinance?
It's state statute.
May result in suspension or revocation of any business license issued to the premises on which the violation occurred in accordance with section, okay.
So are we ready to recommend this be pushed along to full council with their recommendation and any changes?
Are there any additional changes on the decibel limits or the hours?
I've got a problem with the decibels, but I'm just not prepared to say what they should be at this time. They should be lower. I think we have some good data from the residents that are most affected by this one property on 57th Avenue. But I'll be making those changes when it goes to full council or recommendations. Okay?
Could we, just for permits for additional amplification, right now, it's currently written that the application would be made by the police department would approve that. And we had it's written in here, or city council, and I would feel more comfortable if those applications were maybe delivered to the police department. We looked through it to make sure everything was in there to include the affidavit, but ultimately it came to council to vote whether or not to approve those special applications for those noise.
And that would be consistent with how we treat any special sponsored or sanctioned
fair.
events.
That's fair.
So we'll make that change. We'll make that change.
Okay.
No problem.
So with those changes, then I guess I would move that this go to council, full council.
Yes.
Yeah, I
So
will
move.
be making recommendations for adjustments to decibel levels.
Right. Yeah, at full council.
At full council.
Because I agree with you. I don't know what the right decibel level is. And
Right, but I
don't
plan
think-
on
I don't think
researching
that
in
we'll-
detail between
that
now
we're-
and then.
yeah. But I don't think we're ever going to know until we try it on for a few months and see what's going on. That's the only way I know to do it.
And we can create a schedule that shows similar ordinances and what limits they have depending on the time of day, and provide that ahead of time so you all can review that. So we'll include this in the workshop agenda for next month.
Okay. Also include a table that shows the decibel levels and what is the equivalent sound. I think we've had several of them that we've looked at.
Yes.
Someone second that motion from Councilmember Hahn?
Yeah, I think Councilmember Anderson.
Okay.
I moved it, who moved,
Councilmember Hahn made the motion to recommend it to full
Okay, I'll
council with
second,
noted
yeah.
adjustments.
we both moved in second, all right.
Okay, got a motion
Oh,
A second.
and a second.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Good discussion. Thank you very much.
But real quick, one other thing, I'm sorry, Jimmy. We had in public comments discussion about EPA decibel limits. That might be helpful for council in the workshop, just to see what those are.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move on to B, discussion of alternative configurations to the Isle of Palms connector. Who wants to start this one off?
I had a question. I don't know whether we need any introduction to this beforehand. I think we can just talk about the five alternatives. I had a question for Chief Cornett.
Yes, ma'am.
It appears that there are two options that are being discussed. Let's talk that seem to be the most popular. One is with the center lane, emergency lane, or whatever you want to call it, and the other one was with two outbound lanes to Mount Pleasant without the center emergency lane. So my question about the emergency lane is that there seems to be a lot of discussion about having it temporarily used for outbound traffic on our busy days of the year. How do you visualize, assuming that the ends are changed so that the transition onto Mount Pleasant works the way it should, and the transition off of the island works successfully? How do you visualize that happening?
That would take coordination with our partnering agencies, and it would take their willingness to participate in those. And that would be something that would have to be pre-planned well in advance because of the amount of resources it takes to be able to do it. It can be done. It can be something where we cone it off and we use it to exit as a second lane, but it would definitely be something that would have to be pre-planned far in advance, not something that if we just had a pop-up busy day or a rainstorm at the end of the day that we would be able to go out there and turn it into a lane and use it. It wouldn't work that well because we'd have to coordinate with our partners on the other side of the connector, the other side of the bridge.
Mount Pleasant.
Correct, to make sure that they have the resources to do that as well.
Resources meaning
Personnel.
personnel?
Because you're going to have people out there. You're using a lane different than how it normally is used. So if we don't put somebody there, then people are going to make up their own, and then it turns into chaos. And so it would definitely, and we would have to pre-deploy cones down the connector so that we could make sure that it was clearly identified. So it can be done. It would definitely take a lot of coordination between us and Mount Pleasant, maybe even the sheriff's office, maybe even Highway Patrol. The more the merrier.
Yeah.
But it can be done, but would be something that we would only do on certain pre-planned events.
Okay. Here's my concern. I've got here the traffic count data for 2021 for June, July, and August. And the traffic volumes, excuse me if I get a little technical here, are over 20,000 a day for at least 3 months of the year. So we're talking about 100 days of the year when we've got close to capacity traffic on the connector that may require that lane to be outbound at least in the afternoons. Now, what you're telling me is you'd probably have to set it up overnight or something like that beforehand, and then assign your personnel to it for the summer months, basically.
We would not be able to do it every day of the summer month. It would only be a 4th of July, a Memorial Day, a Labor Day. We do not have the resources to do it every day of the summer. We can't. I couldn't commit to that at all.
As the volumes on this road are consistently more than 20,000 vehicles per day for the summer months, weekdays and weekends, and the capacity of a two-lane road is theoretically about 24,000. 4th of July weekend, we did have a volume recorded here of 30,000 vehicles a day. So I'm just watching this thing. Really the demand is for more than a two-lane road, one lane in each direction. So that's one of the considerations, I guess, that is one controlling factor. The other part of it, I guess, that we're always concerned about is safety. So The question I have for both chiefs is, how do you see for each alternative 3 and alternative 5 as the conditions, safety conditions out there, how would it work?
I'll go ahead. Chief Cornett and I have spoken about this quite frequently, from a public safety perspective. Generally, all the designs from a fire department perspective, specifically, we can make those work. The fire department, we look at traffic much different than our police department. The fire department, when we respond to a motor vehicle accident or an auto pedestrian on the roadway, that is one of the most dangerous places for us, even more so than a fire in a structure, in a building, because there are so many variables that are out of our control. We look at the roadway as a very hazardous environment for the fire department. We look at that and we are comfortable 100% with shutting the entire road down so we can do our work and get out quick. So the police department, they have more knowledge and expertise in these type of areas. But for us, we do note the fact that with the reduction in speeds, that is very helpful, because in a motor vehicle collision, the less speed you have, the lower impact it's going to be. And drivers have more time to make corrections. So speed is very important, in my opinion. The second thing is a larger center lane or a larger median is also beneficial, because it allows drivers to make those corrections. Our fire department apparatus and ambulances through Charleston County EMS are a wider vehicle than your normal, passenger vehicle. So those vehicles need space to navigate safely. So a larger center lane or center median, the fire department definitely prefers that. We can make any of those designs work. All of them, definitely have their merit. But Chief Cornett and I, as we've spoken, he has that ability to look at it from a different lens when, an accident does happen. How do we reroute traffic to keep it flowing? Because we don't want those secondary collisions to take place. Yeah. And his officers have to be safe. So he could speak more to that, but the really two takeaway points for us, reduction in speed is important, and a larger center buffer between traffic is also important. And another thing that is noted, and other people have noted it as well, that safety for cyclists and pedestrians on the bridge is highly important, and I know we all agree on that. Now, how we best get to that, that's up for the council to make their recommendation.
Okay.
For us, the issue that we look at when we're looking at the markings on the roadway would be, how can we maneuver traffic around a collision? Mm-hmm. 2 lanes out and 1 in. If you have one of the lanes out, then we just shut that one down and the other one continues to move. If you have a collision and the 1 lane coming onto the island, it's shut down and nobody's coming on until we clear that wreck. There's no room for an emergency vehicle coming from Mount Pleasant side to come up, other than to come against traffic or into the pedestrian bicycle lane. So that would be a concern of safety with the 2 lanes out, is when they're coming to us, how do they get there? And then the other part would just be that when there is a collision, inbound lane is stopped. There's nowhere for us to move traffic because the other 2 lanes are occupied.
How are you dealing with it now without that center median?
We have 2 bicycle paths. Normally, we try to push them into the one that gets the least amount of use, which is the one if you're on it coming from Isle of Palms, it's the one on the right-hand side. So we typically try to use those. We could do that there, but on 5 or 3, you've only got 1 bicycle path or 1 pedestrian lane. So we're stopping everybody. And we've had some close calls using those pedestrian lanes in the past, where bicyclists have almost hit doors that were opening because the collision was moved over to the side. And so to me, I'd rather not use those, because that's a safety concern with those pedestrians. More so the cyclists. Pedestrians can move around the wreck pretty easy, but the cyclists, I've seen several close calls there when we're working a collision and they're riding their bike past.
But you have personnel out there rerouting, controlling the traffic, the rerouting of the traffic when you do
We
that?
reroute it around either into the bicycle lane.
Yeah,
That's really our only option. We either
Yeah.
move the wreck into the bicycle lane or we reroute traffic
traffic
into
into
that
there,
lane.
yeah.
So we would have to do that on the oncoming, but that's your only bicycle pedestrian lane at that point as well. So you'll have a greater concentration of people using it during its max
Well, on
times.
alternative 5, you'd have 2 lanes outgoing, so theoretically, if you shut down 1 lane, you could keep 1 lane open for traffic.
It would take more personnel, though. If we had it coming inbound,
Yeah,
right now, we would have to take personnel to shut it down at 2 different locations to be able to get traffic around it. So we've now multiplied to 3 officers that have to be there to work 1 collision, which our shift is only 3 to 4 officers.
and how many of those collisions that close a lane do we have a year now?
I don't have an answer for that off the top of my
Okay,
head.
I think
Hey,
that may be
One is
something.
too much, in my opinion. I mean, from my perspective, option 3 is the only viable option because of safety. 1 death is 1 death too much. I don't care about whether or not people have to take an extra 10 minutes to get off the island in the summer. I care about whether or not somebody dies. And what I'm hearing from both chiefs is that emergency lane is safer. I've also read with great interest our prior fire chief, Ann Graham's op-ed piece. She says we have to have an emergency lane. That's option 3. She talks about the people that have died on the connector. Again, we go to option 3. I also have a letter, and I've got both of these to put into the record, from the Deputy County Administrator for Charleston County, Eric Watson. He has over 20 years' experience with first responders. He says we have to have an emergency lane because of safety. If people have to go a little bit slower, fine. I'm interested in safety. So those people have told us that we need option 3. Both our chiefs, I believe, have just told us that they would rather us have option 3. The problem with option 3, however, is it does not meet SCDOT's own safety standards, their own safety standards. And under South Carolina law, we have the ability to force them to either comply with the law or do nothing. They have already restriped our bridge in violation of South Carolina law. And I don't see us doing anything here other than forcing them to comply. To comply with the law, we have to have a hard barrier between the vehicles and the pedestrian bicycle lane. We also have to increase the size or the height of the outside bridge so that the pedestrians are safe and there's not a kill zone created. Both our chiefs have just talked about that and the risk to pedestrians and bicyclists when there is an accident. 1 death is too many, people. We have to do this. I don't see any way around it. And just to put into the record, I know SCDOT has said that a, quote, Jersey barrier, the concrete barriers are too heavy for the bridge. It took me less than 5 minutes to find highwayguard.com. They are approved in Georgia, they're approved in North Carolina. And they make metal barriers that weigh 60 pounds per foot that stop the kill zone situation. SCDOT then complained, well, if it's a hard barrier, we can't do maintenance. The Highway Guard barriers will decouple so that you can do maintenance. I don't see that we have any choice but to force SCDOT to do the right thing.
I agree with option 3. Safety is number 1 in my book. Convenience is great, but it should not trump safety.
And I think that option 5 gives us the balance that we need to serve the people on the island, both with safely and add capacity so that their delays will not be as great in the future. My experience as a traffic engineer tells me that there are many roads that function well without these center breakdown lanes in them. If you look at other bridges in this Charleston area, you'll see they don't have these breakdown lanes in it. The Ben Sawyer Bridge doesn't have one. So it's something that I believe that our emergency staff are accustomed to dealing with, that we actually we will have an extra lane in each direction that can be used briefly for bypassing any kind of crash that's on these roads. We don't have many that occur, and I think they're being handled very well now. I do believe that emergency response on the island is important, and I would like to work to have an emergency vehicle stationed on the island permanently during our busiest times of the year. I think the county assigns a vehicle over here during the summer weekends or busy weekends,
Holiday weekends.
holiday weekends.
They have, it's not guarantee if that vehicle is called to another, to respond to another incident, they would be deploying that. So it's not a guarantee that it would be, but we have had that in the past.
But it is assigned here, and then it goes to calls wherever they are. Okay. I would like to see that expanded because, first of all, the response time now to get from the mainland to the island is 20 minutes, something like that. So we eliminate the response time there. By having 2 lanes off the island, then we won't have these huge backups that might take an hour on a summer afternoon to clear. So the emergency vehicle doesn't get stuck in traffic trying to get off the island as well. So I believe that's our solution, is a combination of an emergency vehicle on the island plus the configuration of Alternative 5.
I'm sorry, I have to respond to that. I mean, what I'm hearing is that you're choosing expediency over safety. I don't understand that. You're talking about putting our people, our first responders, at risk. They both just sat here and said that they need to have that center lane because it puts people at risk. I've had a conversation with Chief Oliveras. Just changing the flag at the top of the connector puts his people at risk because traffic can hit his people. I've seen mothers jogging with a stroller on the connector. What do you do when a car swerves towards you? You're going to swerve into the lane where the mother is. No, we have to stand up for safety. I don't care how long it takes to get off the island. Safety has to be the number one concern, and we have to follow the advice of our first responders that know what they're talking about.
Well, if you're trying to get to the hospital, you might care about how long it takes to get off the island.
Well, then you'll have an emergency lane, and you can get to the hospital.
I think we have 2 different opinions here. There are 2 choices. I think there are ways that there are pros and cons for each one.
I don't see it. I really don't see it. SCDOT is cramming something down our throat, and nobody has the backbone to stand up to them. I'm here to stand up to them. I don't want anybody to die. We've had people die on that bridge, and one of the reasons is because of the way it is configured. Tell the families of the people that are dead that, well, we got to have 2 lanes so we can get off the island fast. I'm sorry. I'm gonna
Well,
start.
I think in the past, especially our former fire chief was talking about incidents that occurred when we did have that center breakdown lane.
We still did not have any way to protect the pedestrians and the bicyclists. That needs to be done. We are now inviting these people onto the connector. Before, they were not invited. It was just a lane. Now we are inviting people onto the connector. There's a huge difference. We also have more traffic than we've had in the past.
Yes,
we have to follow our people's recommendations.
Yeah, the fire chief has been working on the EMS service for quite a while already. Okay, anything else on this?
I don't know do we need to recommend to council?
Yeah, I think we should.
Options.
This is very important.
Should we wait until the survey is over that SCDOT is taking? Although there are issues with that as well.
No, No.
When's their 30 days up?
That is
Not
up
from
to you
them.
all. The public comment period was going to be in place for about 30 days. So yeah, it would be until early to mid-February when that public comment period would be over.
I think we need to make a statement today, and I entertain a motion.
I move that the committee recommends option 3 to full council, but only if additional barriers are part of that option so that the bridge complies with SCDOT's own safety regulations.
Second. Any further discussion?
I would just like to mention that I prefer alternative 5.
Okay. Okay, when I have vote, all in favor of approving option 3 to recommend to council, say aye. Aye. All against?
Nay.
Motion passes 2-1. We'll go on to new business. A, discussion of drone rules and regulations.
Thank you.
This came about, it's more of something I brought up. It's more that I would present in public safety, I promised the resident, about this young lady saying there's drones flying over the top of her house. And she's out there in good weather, enjoying the sun on the rooftop deck. And drones keep flying by, and they've got cameras. And I just wondered, do we have any regulations? If not, can we or can we not?
So it's kind of interesting. FAA does have regulations that every recreational drone operator has to abide by, to include a new certification that they have to do. I did it Tuesday. It's super easy, but it outlines all the guidelines to make sure you understand them and you get tested on it at the end. But there are FAA guidelines. Now, the downside to that is FAA is the one that enforces those. And we're typically not going to get an FAA representative to come out here every day to enforce a drone. Town of Kiowa does have an ordinance. City of Charleston took up a conversation about an ordinance back in sometime a couple years, 2015, for their public safety committee, but it never took off and went anywhere. We have had one incident that Chief Oliveris was made me aware of where a drone came down and did hit somebody on the beach last year. Is that right, Chief?
Yes, it was July 24th. An individual was near the county park, and she did not know the person flying the drone, and the drone either lost power or something happened, and it came down. It was about a 1 to 2 pound drone, and struck that individual in the face, in the chin. She had a small laceration to her chin. She did deny treatment and care from EMS, but we helped her. We were first response, and so we helped control what bleeding there was and took care of that issue. And she did also complain of dizziness, so they were concerned about a potential concussion. But that is the one injury that that we have noted from a drone over the past 2 to 3 years when we pulled the data.
Okay,
I did do some research before we go any further.
okay.
And there has been a city that it was the city of Newton in Colorado, or I'm sorry, Massachusetts, who did develop an ordinance, and it was challenged. And ultimately, in that challenge, they revoked 4 of the standards that they came up with. One was requiring it to register with the city. The others pertain to prohibiting it from flying over municipal-owned properties, and that was found that they could not limit that. The other one was limiting the ability to fly over residential structures without having permission from the resident. That was struck down as well. And then the fourth one was kind of surprised me, was that you had to fly it and maintain a line of sight. That was struck down as well. But interestingly enough, that's one of the FAA guidelines to be able to enforce it. The argument was that the only people that have the authority to govern that airspace between 400 feet and lower would be the FAA. And that was the argument that the judge made. So I'm not saying we can't do one. I'm saying we would have to look at how it lines up with FAA and maybe get our attorney to see how they feel about those types of ordinances and whether we would even have the ability to do so.
Okay, would it be a waste of money and attorney's expenses to draw one up and see if we get challenged?
That would be a decision for you, sir.
That's our call, right?
Yes, sir.
I would suggest that we have the city attorney look at this issue and tell us what he thinks we can and can't regulate. I mean, if we don't do something, then we're going to have residents with pellet guns shooting at drones.
And we do have a voyeurism and a harassment statute. And if we have certain criteria that are met from a drone being operated flying over a location that would meet either harassment, stalking, or voyeurism, then we do have that ability to make those charges. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds, though. It has to be a repetitive behavior, and it takes several steps to be met in order to get the solicitor's office to move forward with prosecution for that. But it is a high court misdemeanor charge at General Sessions.
So this person could call in the police department, make a complaint.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay.
How easy would it be to enforce
Which part?
any drone regulation? I
Wouldn't you
just
have to first figure out where the
who
drone came from?
correct who owns it.
Right. Well, there is software that gives the ability to do those things, and that would be something if we did pass an ordinance that maybe we would be able to obtain that equipment and software. There are some where you can actually take control over it and land it, and it'll give you a GPS coordinate of where the actual pilot is located. A lot of times we've had issues where we were using our drone for events in the past where we were monitoring city-sanctioned events, and we'd had other drones that would come and get in the way and flying over large crowds of people and those types of things that we had concerns about, but really we didn't have much to work with to do anything.
I would suggest that we look into just number of of complaints so far before we go down this path. I am concerned with continuing to add ordinances and expect our police department to enforce with the current staffing. We've heard a lot of complaints about lack of enforcement of livability ordinances, and that's something that we've certainly heard loud and clear. I just would like to keep that in mind when thinking about additional regulations that we expect our personnel to enforce. And
But the police chief just said we already have a vehicle in place. Harassment, voyeurism.
correct.
What was the other one? Something.
I would say if it violates those three statutes would be the ones that are interfering on somebody's personal
Right.
life. So if it's a violation of one of those statutes, I'd rather pursue it with
So
one
I'm
of those
thinking
charges as opposed to a
It's not
municipal
needed.
ordinance.
I agree with Desiree, and, I'm one of these, as few ordinances as possible. Some people will just put in ordinance just to put them in, and we can't enforce them. So I really appreciate your research. Anybody else have further discussion on this matter? Very good. Moving on, item B, discussion of request to lower speed limit at Oak Harbor Boulevard from 25 miles an hour to 10 or 15 miles an hour. As you all know, Oak Harbor is right behind us here, and it runs, there's a street here and, what would it be, the 13th? Yeah,
That ends at 11th,
Of 11th.
from 11th to 13th Avenue.
right. And some residents back there telling me that sometimes, they have a lot of traffic because of City Hall and stuff. And I guess people are speeding to make their court date. So they don't want to be late. And we feel it's not safe for pets and kids, and they asked me to bring it up, and so that's what I'm doing. And what is the process, Chief, on this? I guess we'd have to make that request if we decided to do it through SCDOT.
That's correct, sir. It is a DOT-owned roadway, so we would have to make a request, and we typically have to, in that request, explain our purpose as to why we want it lowered. Similar to the way we made the request to lower the other speed limits on the secondary roads on the island.
Are you in agreement that 25 is probably a little too fast back there?
25 is it's tight on that road, and
Yeah.
there are cars parked on. I don't know how you go 25 on that road. I typically don't feel comfortable going 20. So
Yeah. Any appetite for pursuing this? I'd like to pursue it. just put a request in SCDOT and see what they do. Okay. Thanks. Item C, discussion of regulations of electric bikes on the beach. This is probably already covered, but it's another request from a citizen. They're just concerned that some of these electric bikes go pretty fast. Some of them 20, 25 miles an hour, even higher. And they're not like a regular bike, and they go zooming down the beach in between families and kids and stuff on the beach. And I was wondering what regulations were in place, if there was something we could do to curb this, the speeding and reckless driving on the beach.
And I'd like to see us just ban electric bikes on the beach in total. So I'll throw that out there.
Is there any regulation of motorized vehicles on the beach now?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you cannot drive a vehicle on a beach. However, according to state statute 56-110, they have a specific definition for an electric assist bicycle. And it even states in there that they are not a moped. They do not meet the requirement to be a moped. And a moped and an LSV are our lowest level of vehicles as defined. So it does not meet a vehicle definition. There are other municipalities that enforce it as a vehicle under their same statutes or ordinances like ours, but they're also referencing other state statutes like 56.5, 35.20, and 34.20, which both pertain to bicycles. So I do not believe that it meets the definition or standard to be a motor vehicle. The electric watts are simply not there to do so. My recommendation would be to keep it clear and consistent, to add a clause to our section right now that is 8-1-19, vehicular operation on the beach or beach accesses, to just say, right now it says no person shall operate or allow or cause to be operated a vehicle on the beach or beach access except as provided in other statutes, which would be pertaining to law enforcement and handicap LSVs. I would recommend we just add the section in there after a vehicle or an electric assist bicycle. And if you do that, you've accomplished the goal, and it is clear. It doesn't leave us later on to be challenged as to whether it's a vehicle or not.
Well, Blair said.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes, sir. That
Okay.
would keep it.
This is the lawyer in me, instead of or to include electric assist vehicle. Or yeah, any electric assist,
Yeah,
Everybody in agreement with that?
bicycle.
Correct,
vehicle.
yeah.
Yes.
yeah, and anyone who's using it because of handicapped issues or something like that could get a special permit.
They're exempt,
They're,
yeah.
Yeah,
they're already
they're
exempt
exempt.
by statute.
Would you all like to make a motion to recommend this to the full council for
Yes.
consideration?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hope we're not putting too much on you, chief. Just,
That one was easy, sir.
Yeah, that-
okay, great. Next item
D.
D, discussion of firework regulations. And I'll just bring this up to try to shorten the conversation. Because my observation, and in the past years, on July 4th and on New Year's Eve, there was always big signs posted, usually in red letters on the entrance boards to the island. Fireworks are prohibited on Isle of Palms. There was even some of the small signs that the rec department puts out saying, and posted on Waterway and Palm Boulevard, fireworks are prohibited. And I'd like this, I don't know if this would, I'm sure it wouldn't take a vote. I would just like to get this committee's agreement. Maybe we go back to that. What am I trying to say? Just go back to doing that.
Well, and I will just say, we typically do that for 4th of July for, a myriad of reasons that were certainly not intentional. It was not done in December for the new year, but that is certainly part of what we typically do, and we'll make sure that that is consistently done in those type of holidays.
That's good enough for me.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
That's good.
All right, thank you very much. Item E, discussion of installing a people counter system at the public dock. This is something I've been inquiring about for quite a while now, ever since the city took over the dock. Everybody's always talking about data. They want to know how much data. And I would just like to talk about putting in a counter system at the public dock, see how many people are using that dock. I go down there 2-3 times a week, every week. Just my experience, I know it's not everybody else's. I've never seen anybody on the dock. I'd like to see how much is being utilized before we drop a lot of money in improving that dock. And I think it's something that we can easily measure, and we can come back to the council and say, okay, these are the number of people using the dock. Are y'all happy with that? If so, let's go forward. Any response, Desiree, or from the committee?
We can look into what systems are out there that could be installed in the public dock so that we can gather data of usage. We can certainly look into that if that is the will.
I'd like to have that in place if possible, by Memorial Day.
I think, wouldn't we need to see what the cost of it is first?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we don't.
Let her tell us how we're gonna do it, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And how effective it would be in actually capturing. I guess there is just one entrance
Yeah, there is.
point.
There's only one entrance.
We can just put an intern down there.
No, we don't need to do that.
In his
Just
bathing
need
suit, in a kayak.
just need some information. How many people are actually using it? Okay, I'm gonna keep that on the agenda in the future. F, discussion of improvements to the Harris Teeter entrance to improve safety. Now, Jan, you're the traffic engineer. You could probably address this better than the rest of us.
I'm not sure what your concern is.
Okay, well, if you let me finish, I'll tell you.
Okay,
People are always telling me that they have trouble getting in and out of the Harris Teeter parking lot. And that they would like to see improvements to the design, maybe add another entrance and exit, trimming the shrubs on Palm Boulevard when you're coming out. I'm in a sedan, low to the ground. I can't ever see. It seems to be a safety issue. And we'd just like to look at improvement of egress and ingress to that parking lot.
well, there are 3 entrances now
Well, there's 2, and then there's one at the
at 18th Avenue.
vet's office.
Yes, that's 3. Hate to tell you what DOT would
Decisions
probably
have to be
say.
made today. Several people have asked me about it, and I said I'd bring it up, so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. This is just an opinion, but probably DOT would prefer to close the middle entrance and force everybody to use the 18th Avenue entrance to create distance from the 14th Avenue intersection. Another one would be to separate the exiting left turns and force them all to use 18th Avenue to reduce conflicts, stuff like that we could suggest. I'm not sure how the shopping center would feel about that.
Well, this is just an introductory question.
Yeah,
Not sure if it's going anywhere at all.
yeah. The one thing I will tell you
Bring
is
it up.
DOT would not approve another signal there. It's too close to the,
At minimum, I'm sure it's a long-term project,
yeah.
but I thought I'd bring it up. It may
Okay.
go nowhere. That's fine, but I think it's our job to respond to the residents.
I agree with you, and I think we need to engage the beach company on that issue, because it is a mess, especially in,
Oh, I'd like to redo
summer.
that whole
Especially in the
shopping
summer, it
center.
really is.
Yeah.
My car got hit in the parking lot
Oh,
recently.
I was
so-
there.
Yeah, that's right. We were both there. I finally got paid, by the way. But yeah,
Okay.
I don't know how much we can do. Certainly on private property, we have limiting abilities.
Well, it's gonna take coordination with the beach company for sure. Item G, discussion of police department annual award ceremony. I just had one question. How much did the police department pay for the annual award ceremony?
Are you asking how much just the police department?
Just the
or
police
other?
department paid.
The police department expenses were $1,262.12. And that includes awards, uniform citations, and things like that for the employees to be recognized.
Right. Were there any other city monies involved, Desiree?
No, sir.
Okay, so it was $1,200.
Yes, sir.
That's going to
And
put the rest a lot of rumors.
Yeah, I'd just like to
appreciate that.
say on the record too, this is the fourth year that the city and the police department have done this event. I think it's a fabulous event. I'm really glad that Chief Cornett brought it. The first year he was appointed, it gives us an opportunity to recognize our officers. I think they really enjoy it. This year, I saw all of you attend that meeting. Everybody on council was invited, so I think that hopefully we can get more engagement from the community in these events. I believe this year, 2 scholarships were awarded to family members of our police officers, and it was really exciting to hear their stories and their plans and how they plan to use those funds that were donated through a different organization that raises money to support law enforcement. So I just want to publicly state that I think it's something that we should support and hopefully do more of in other departments as well, not just the police department.
Who paid the balance of the funds?
I think they were donated
By?
the Lens Foundation.
We had Lynn's Foundation donated, paid for the venue and some of the other things. And then we did have other donations that came from local businesses and our chaplain.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item H, consideration of approval of amount not to exceed $18,000 for the purchase of 980 AED defibrillators. So fiscal year of 24 municipal ATAX budget, fire department, non-capital tools and equipment. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Chief?
Well, before I'll let the chief explain the need and what we're replacing, this is the line item that I would recommend we use for this unbudgeted expenditure. We currently do not have anything, any amount included in that line item, but we usually run light in some other line items so that we can make up and not be over the budget at the end of the day in that capital projects line. So I'm recommending approval. We will identify potential additional sources of revenue within that line item. But it is an unbudgeted expenditure, which is why we're bringing it before you all for a recommendation to council.
Which you can pick it up somewhere else
Yes,
in the approved budget.
yes, sir.
Any further discussion?
No.
There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Miscellaneous business, set standing meeting date. I think a lot of things got cleared up today. I would like to set another meeting just to follow up on some things, especially like the electric bikes. Let everybody know that we're on it.
My
people
recommendation with that, Chair, is that would be a very simple amendment to the ordinance, so we can bring that to council next month
Okay,
or to the workshop as an ordinance amendment drafted.
okay.
But would it be best to go straight to council because we want them to vote on it and accept such a minor change like that?
Yeah, we
Let's
can
just do it
have
straight
that
to
ready
council.
for the February 23rd meeting, I believe. 28th.
I feel like to set a meeting that I may decide to cancel it. What's the administration's calendar look like?
So in February, we will also be bringing before you all and all the other committees the 10-year capital plan for FY24. We're starting the budgeting process this month. We certainly want to set a standing meeting so that everybody can put it in the calendar. If there's no need to call for a meeting chair, then we can cancel it, but that way everybody understands if there is a meeting, when it would be. Today, we're trying out having all the committee meetings back to back to see how that would work on staff. I think it would be better for us to have them all on the same day. But I wanted to hear from you all if there is a particular day of the week that you prefer.
I'm wide open.
Would the first Tuesday of every month work at this time?
No, that won't work. Yeah, that'll work.
What time?
10 a.m.?
10 a.m. first Tuesday.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That gives us time before the workshop and the council meeting, if there's anything in between that we would need to do.
So 10 a.m. on first Tuesdays would be meeting day.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Yeah, that's,
Very good.
works well.
That'll be like the
7th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Executive session, there's no need for
Well,
executive session?
excuse me,
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to have one other miscellaneous business. Request to add at our next meeting, consideration of short-term rental parking issues that come up. So we just start addressing parking.
Is that fine, or is that better suited for real property, or should we take it up too?
If it's parking, public safety has traditionally
Okay.
taken on those type of
All right, very good.
issues.
It's on.
Thank you.
No further business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank
Record
you.
11:35.